This episode of NSC TV is brought to you by Leonora SSAA, Bushrangers Brotherhood, Geelong Firearm Courses, Hunters and Shooters Society of Australia, Auto Scratch, Killsite Outdoor Store, Shooters Union of Australia, and the Ballarat Arms and Military Collectors Society. Welcome to another episode of NSC TV, and thank you to our patron supporters and our sponsors for making this possible. Today we speak with Mark Heelis, who's a Western Australian coordinator for the NSC, about life in WA as a shooter and the exorbitant fees they have to pay. So stick around. I'm here with Mark Heelis, who's the Western Australian coordinator of the NSC. How you doing, Mark?
Yeah, good. Thanks, Neil. Thank you for having me on.
Not a problem. So today we're talking about the People's Republic of Western Australia and
That's
how
a good name for it.
do different things differently over there, not necessarily in a good way either, fortunately, as far as shooters are concerned. So as most people will be aware, we've had quite a few legal wins in WA, and it started actually in 2019, 2020 when the gun shops in the Labor states closed at the beginning of COVID, and we had a challenge to the refusal by WA Police to issue a licence during that time where there was a bit of a hiatus or moratorium effectively on issuing licences, which we won. And then we had the fights against the reclassification of the Ruger PC Charger, and there's quite a number of other guns I think which remained reclassified. So just on the legal wins, we actually have a couple more cases which are going to be finalised fairly soon, and they are to do with 300 Win Mag and 300 PCR calibers. So Western Australia has become a bit of a hotbed of our legal actions there, Mark, which you no doubt have seen.
It's good. It's keeping them on their toes and keeping them honest. Well, trying to keep them honest.
Okay. So, you've also had the recent fight over gel blasters, where your minister was famously standing before a media conference carrying one, trying to look like a real He-Man.
Yes, I went down to the police station and I handed over my $39 gel blaster that was very dangerous.
We'll come back to that photo opportunity that he took a little bit later on in this. And in recent days, we had some very positive coverage, I think, over the stupid release of the maps by
the good old maps.
The Western Australian Police to the media, where what happened is they released maps which originally showed dots as to where licensed shooters had lived, and some media outlets overlaid that with images of bullet holes. So the footprints became larger. The original maps had quite small dots, and as a lot of people will be aware, we had some recent coverage in the Western Australian media about how those maps would be reverse engineered to produce lists of licensed addresses. So that map issue, Mark, that caused quite a stink over there amongst.
It's still shooters. Causing a stink over here. I mean, a couple of academics have come out and proven that they have some software. They can reverse it back and say, yes, this person lives here. One of them actually checked his parents' property, and yep, there it was, and they had a firearms license. And yet the police are still saying, no, you can't.
What they're also saying is that the maps were really the dots actually were randomized. And what we're saying is that actually it doesn't matter if they're randomized or if they're accurate. People can use information to derive a list of addresses where they think firearms are stored, even if they aren't. You wouldn't want to be a householder who gets targeted because the police decided to put a dot on the roof of your house.
And if you were targeted, whose responsibility is it?
Yeah, well, it becomes a problem in which you can't prove. So this is the story which we had in WA Today fairly recently, where obviously we were able to have the matter highlighted, and we also ended up on 6PR to talk about the same matter. So we don't know if it's going to result in anything, but certainly it highlights the wrongfulness of police using sensitive information that we provide because of a licensing process to be basically publicly revealed in that way. You can support NSC TV by becoming a subscriber at nsctv.com.au. And the other thing about being a shooter in WA is the cost. Mark, getting a license in WA, how much does it cost?
At the moment, the fees have just gone up as of the 1st of July. Your original firearms license is going to cost you $377. That's just to get your first license. Anything after that, if it's called an additional here in WA, we have to do a separate application for it. Again, if we're shooting for a club or on someone's property, we have to provide a property letter. And we also have to provide a letter from your gun club. And that's going to cost you $256 every time you wish to add an additional firearm.
So these are the original application fees that you pay, and I think you get your first year included. What you mean by additional license, though, in other states means
a PTA.
You have a permit to acquire. So
yeah.
You pay your $377 to get a license, the actual piece of paper, and then you want to buy a gun. Then that's the first one included in that $377, but then the whole thing has to get renewed each year at $67 a year for private individuals.
Yep.
So it's so basically you're looking at about $400, $500, $600, $700 roughly for a 5-year license with one firearm attached to it, in that order, something along those lines.
Yeah, roughly.
Because the situation in other states is quite different. I was actually having a look at license fees in some of the other states. Let me quickly run through them. New South Wales, a 5-year license, so that doesn't include any firearms, but the 5-year license itself is $200. In Victoria, it's $250. In Queensland, it's about $300. In Tasmania, it's $153. They're 5-year licenses in those states. Add a gun to it, and the cost does go up. But here's the unusual thing. In Western Australia, you've got your additional license, as you call it. In other states, it's a permit to acquire, which, and in addition to that, you've got your serviceability certificate. So when you get a gun, you've got to get a piece of paper, which doesn't do anything, but it's another cost. Getting back to the additional licenses, you want to renew your license and a gun license at $67. You go to, let's take Victoria as an example, a permit to acquire a long arm. It's a once-off fee. In fact, I'm going through the process now. I'm about to pick up another gun. I paid a grand total of $9.20 to get the approval from Victoria Police to have this gun, and there is no annual fee, nothing else to pay after that.
That's unbelievable.
Western Australia. You were telling me about dealer fees before.
Okay, dealer license fees. If a gun shop opens up tomorrow, it's going to cost that dealer $804 to open up his gun shop. That's just the license from police to say, I'm a licensed gun shop. Also, that applies for manufacturers and repairers. And then it's $364 a renewal each year. Okay.
Compare that to New South Wales. Firearm dealer license, 5-year license, is $500 even. So that is the world that unfortunately Western Australian shooters and dealers, the whole industry lives in. Do you run a business that supports the shooting industry? Take out a gold, silver or bronze sponsorship with the NSC to get your logo on our videos. Other states use a permit to acquire system for the guns, which actually is in the National Firearms Agreement. It actually talks about permits. So you don't have that. You've got higher costs. You've got serviceability certificates, which aren't in the NFA. It's another cost. And the other thing about your fees over there is that they are not subject to any public scrutiny.
I sent an email off to police licensing several years ago and asked how they could justify such large fees. And the response I got back was, we don't have to. We don't have to justify.
And that's actually legally correct. In other states, they have fees usually have to go through a public process called a regulatory impact statement, where they have to actually lay out what the costs of administering the law is, what other options there are than to charging the user, and what the cost to the user could be. So it's quite open, it's quite transparent. It may not end up with the right result as far as we're concerned, but at least it gives you something where you can question it. We actually provide the WA government along the same lines as yourself, and effectively what the answer you got back says is that it's a decision made by ministers and there is no public input. Earlier today you sent me basically a table showing the amount of time that they spend to actually process licenses, and I think for the individual firearm license, it takes the registry around 2.5 hours to review the initial application. So they're paying $377 for 2.5 hours of a bureaucrat's time. One other thing which has come up, perhaps not so much an issue for WA shooters, but it is a problem for other shooters, is if they want to go to WA. You can't, unlike other states where you just go interstate and you produce your license if you need to. In Western Australia, shooters' licenses from other states are not recognised automatically. We actually have to go to a police station and get a permit when we cross the border. So this is where WA, as I said, has gone way off in a different direction, and it's come up with obviously a regime that's costing shooters over there fees which they just would not have to put up with in other states. So let's talk a little bit about your minister, Paul Papalia, who in March came up with 2 headlines through the Western Australian newspaper, which I think unfortunately show the problem that shooters in Western Australia have. So the first is this headline: police were apparently losing cases at the Western Australian State Admin Tribunal, and that's the claim there that as because they failed to win the cases, that criminals are getting their licenses back. It just shows to me the fact that the police are struggling to have good evidence to convince the State Admin Tribunal that those people should not have guns. And now Papalia is looking to tighten gun laws for some reason.
The problem is the police don't know their own regulations properly like the NSC does.
Well, as we said in one of our videos covering this, that it comes down to the quality of the evidence that the police present. And if they lose cases, well, that's one thing. But the other thing about it is that they can appeal decisions that go against them. That's how the legal system works. And we've just we recently covered a story in Northern Territory where the same thing applies. If they lose a matter, they should appeal it. That's the legal system. It's the legal system we use. It's the same legal system they use. And the other headline, which we've already talked about or mentioned this, is that Mr. Papalia kindly organised for us, was the maps, which as you can see here. So he's been on the warpath using the Western Australian newspaper to develop this story. So we've developed our own story. Going out in electorates, his electorate in the next few days is something that's been delayed because of COVID, but this is the front page of a flyer, which is going to go into the letterboxes of every voter in his electorate. And the second page of that is this one, where we explain that their local member is the police minister. Even if the reader doesn't support the shooting sports, they should be concerned about the lack of professionalism on his part, that he claims that gel blasters can be converted to real firearms, and that he allowed those maps to be published showing where firearms can be stolen, to say that's what their local member is doing. So we're also encouraging them to contact him and let him know. So that's probably going to cause a bit of a stir in his electorate, but that's what we do.
He makes claims a gel blaster can be converted to be a real firearm. Have they done a video to show that this is possible?
You try to convert a plastic gun to fire around,
Someone's going to get hurt.
you're welcome to stand behind it.
No, thank you.
So if we were to talk about the shooting community in Western Australia, specifically shooting organisations that are there now, we've obviously got the SSAA, you've probably got the Western Australia Rifle Association, I think there's a small bore association, no doubt pistol groups. How active in this do you think they really are? I mean,
just lately they've been very active. They're putting up great big signs on all the gun shops to say that SSAA is here for you, and yeah, they're here for us. I don't know how they are here for us. I enjoy their magazine. I enjoy their firearms insurance. For me, that's about it.
Good. If they're there for the members, that's fantastic. And let's pare things back a little bit. I mean, these organisations really were created and exist to run ranges and events, and no doubt they do that well. If they're making claims about dealing with this stuff, then I certainly would be pleased to hear it. I know they've been critical of some things, and they said they've had meetings with ministers about these and the gun shop closures and the like. Are you hearing much about what else they're doing on that front?
No, nothing. Even in their magazine, there's not a lot about. They say they're doing things, but unlike the NSC, they're not putting that information out there and saying, "Hey, we've done this for this member. We've done this for this member." There's no information.
Yeah, it's not an easy fight politics is not an easy game to embark in, and I come back to why the organisations were created originally, which was to run events and look after ranges. We actually offered to work with them in the early days, and they didn't.
Why can we not all get together and work together? Politics, that's why.
It's one of the
internal politics is one of the biggest things.
It's one of the most common complaints people have of the shooting community. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, Mark, thank you for your time today. I really appreciate you having a chat with us. And if people want to contact you, your email address is
on the bottom of the screen right now.
Thank you. It will be.
And also my phone number there. Please feel free to call me, even if it's just for a chat, and join NSC. We're here to fight for you.
Great. Okay. Mark Heelis, thank you for your time.
Okay, thanks, Neil.
Well, I hope you enjoyed this episode of NSC TV, and don't forget to share this with your friends and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We'll see you around.